I'm glad to see all of you here tonight, and I tell you, we've got an exciting subject. In fact, for me, I have taken a lot of courses I'm a certified consultant for anger management, depression, anxiety, as well as civil disobedience and all that in the homes. And I've tried my best to understand how the brain works, and God has given us the information. And so, by the way, this is not Brian, this is Brian. Okay. And once you get the big head back in. Not saying you don't have a brain, I'm just saying. And there are parts of the brain, so let's talk about them. Let's take a look over in Hebrews chapter 3, verses 3 through 5, and see what it says there to us. Hebrews 3, verses 3 through 5. Jesus has been found worthy of greater honor than Moses, just as the builder of a house has great honor than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Now he's telling us there that you have a house, or you have a tent, as Paul talks about it, which is your physical body. However, it is your job and your responsibility to make sure it's built according to God. And so everything you do, everything you look at tonight, we're going to talk about how to use it for God. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about, there are three parts basically of the brain, and the first one is the subconscious mind. Now, in the subconscious mind, it holds all the things of the past. You can consider it like a humongous library. All the smells you've ever had, all the music you've heard, the conversations, what you saw on the road when you were driving, all the people you met, all of that is held inside your subconscious mind. And in there also are things that people have told you that may sculpt who you are today, may even affect you. And the problem with it is, as you can see with this particular library here, could you imagine going in and trying to find where the problem is and going back and examining it and trying to undo it? That is virtually impossible. However, God tells us you're in charge of building your house. And because your house was built by God for you, then the builder becomes more important than the house. So when we build our house according to how God wants us to build it, then we are actually becoming important over our body, over what God has given us. In fact, you've seen people who did not have good bodies or even good minds, and yet were able to motivate people, bring about great following, even getting riches, because they had defects of some kind. And he's telling you, in telling us, that inside this house you have a mind, and your mind is made up these parts. What we have come to determine, the subconscious, and also the conscious mind. That's the subconscious mind. So I'll give you a little heading there. And then also the conscious mind. Now, this is things that you experience on a daily basis. For example, you may be going out with people and you're walking around. Everything that you experience, the smells, like if rain, there's even names for certain smells. Rain on asphalt, hot asphalt, there's a name for that, and I don't clutter my mind with that. And or maybe when you're at work and you're dealing with people there, and people come in and talk to you, how are you making their day better because they're in your store or asking you for service? How is it better? These things are consciously done, and you're consciously seeing things. Hey, here's a picture for you. You're fixing to go to Hawaii. So so cold. I understand that, but the problem with it is you can't bring any of that back with you, you know. If you're there, buy a bottle of air, but when you get home, you know, it's gonna be just as cold as it was there, as here anyway. So all those experiences that you have on a daily basis are in your conscious mind, but in your subconscious mind, all these other things are locked away. And you might be able to say, well, what was that guy's name? And you'll go back and you'll remember that name, but there's a lot of things in there you'll never be able to catch and understand again. In fact, have you ever had a certain smell come up and all of a sudden it takes you all the way back to your childhood or something like that? There's a certain smell that I smell every once in a while. It's a very sickening smell, and I remember going into my grandfather's garage and he had a jar and I opened it and smelled that. Wherever it was, I have no idea. But I remember going in there doing it as a little kid. So all those things are in your mind, and even driving. However, at the same time, driving also can be in your subconscious mind because you're not thinking about how to shift. You're not thinking, and many times you can drive all the way home from work and not even remember whether you stopped at the red lights or not. And you did because you're paying attention, but you're really involved in something and your subconscious takes over. Like when I do a furniture upholstery, I have had to train myself to do it in certain ways, and there are ways that you can do it and where it comes out better and better and better looking. And so I would always work hard to have the best look I could. And that training, you don't have to train yourself every time. That's in your subconscious. But your conscious mind is saying, here's what I need to do, and your subconscious takes over. Does that make sense? And so those two things work very well together. And then, of course, you have the amygdala. Now, your writing is on there is wrong because I have no idea how to spell in my computer corrects it. But to look at the way it's spelled, amygdala, it holds all your feelings. Now look at this. Look at the size of your brain and see how big your brain is compared to where your feelings are. And most people start out with their feelings. Immediately they're hurt by what you said, or they're warmed by what you said, or they are angry about what you said, or whatever. Offended, yeah, that's the good word for today. They're offended by what you have said or done. And so the amygdala holds all of your feelings, and we're going to talk about how you can control yourself in those areas, because feelings are fickle. They change on a dime, and they can make it where your emotions run high or they run low. You can feel guilty about things. You can have hope about things. All of this is involved in your amygdala. Excuse me, I'll get it out. I told you I was trained, but not in speaking. All right. So now that is the whole of your mind. Now we didn't go into every single last detail, but you get the idea that this is what's involved in your brain and what's involved in your daily activities. Now let's talk about, we saw that, feelings. All right, let's talk about what 1 Peter says here in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15. 1 Peter 3, verse 15. But in your hearts set apart, Christ is Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer for everything, for everyone who asks you in giving and to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and with respect. Now, what is he saying there? You have the ability to have the recall of all those things you studied, and it should drive who you are, and it should make a difference to you. But how do we then change who we are? Because if we have something that is normal to us to do, and now here we are following God, and we want to do something different, how then do we change it? Now here's something very interesting. No matter who you have been, you must set your heart on Christ. Now what I'm talking about there is, we have all been somebody in the past. We've all done things we shouldn't have done. We've all gotten in fights or gotten angry about this or that, or maybe we've done very sinful things. But that doesn't matter now, because your sins were washed away in baptism. You know good and well, you now have to set your heart on Christ. And to do that, you have to be in control of how you think. Your heart is your longings, or what you really hold dear to you. And so if you're going to set your heart on Christ, then you have to work hard to be able to overcome what you've allowed to be there before. For example, cussing. If you were very accustomed to cussing, the children have a problem with this, because they go home and their parents are cussing all the time. They watch TV, there's cussing on TV. In fact, we even hear our president cussing, and when he does, everybody really gives a raucous applaud. And so our children come to school and they can't turn it off. It's so difficult. They're trying their best to talk normally, but then when somebody sets them off, or something happens where they feel that they're less or whatever, they go right back into cussing, because it is what they're accustomed to doing. So now, let's take you. Here you do come to God, and you're saying, look, I want you to be my Father. I want to act as Christ acted, where I'm a sinless person. How do I handle this? And so you have to learn how to correct that and how to change it. Now, I don't cuss, but I don't cuss for a long time. I did before that. And it's very difficult for me, because sometimes I even think it, but it never gets past the thinking. You see what I'm saying about control? How you have to use your brain, the parts of your brain, so that it doesn't affect you. In fact, there are times I don't speak, because if I were to speak, I would say something inappropriate, or in a way that's inappropriate, and so therefore I just don't even respond to somebody when they're criticizing me, and it's unjust, and I've already told them it's unjust, and yet they're not going to change, and so they accuse me. I would just simply remain silent, because I know that I have a propensity to be angry about things. My father was angry. I watched him do it all his life, and it's very easy for me to get angry, and so I have to be very careful with that. And so this is what I'm talking about, going in your mind, because this is a fertile ground in your mind, and what grows there has to be fruit of God and not weeds. And so you're constantly in there de-weeding your garden. We used to have a garden out there in Delaware. It was probably close to a quarter acre, and I had roped it off with some wire to be able to make it where the deer couldn't get in there. And it was nothing but weeds. I mean, ultimately, when Valentina was gone, there was nothing there, and so every once in a while I'd open the door, go in there and mow it. And I called it the Garden of Weeding. You know, I mean, it was just nothing but weeds in it. So what you have to do is be in control of your heart. Look at the word set, to set. I was working offshore one time. Well, I was building oil wells and gas wells, platforms that are offshore in the Galveston, in the Gulf of America. When I was doing it, was called Gulf of America, and now it's called it was called, Gulf of Mexico, now it's called Gulf of America. But I'd go out there, and one time I had the pleasure of being the only person on the boat who was a passenger, and they were taking me and a whole bunch of food out to the barge. And it's about at least a 5 or 6 hour ride out there. And so the captain told me I could come into the front room there, what's it called, the helm, or what's it called, huh?
Pilot house.
Yeah, well, wherever and I don't remember the name. Well, I have a friend of mine who would really get mad at me because he's a merchant marine, and he knows all those things. But I would go in there with him, and I was sitting on a little stool beside him, and he says, "You see that?" And he's pointing to a compass a lot like this. In fact, I took this picture off of a boat, and the heading is important. He says, if I don't keep this headed in a certain direction, we're not going to get to that barge. And he says, I can't go beside a wave, because if we have rough seas, it'll come over the boat. I say little boat, this thing would hold 60 passengers and all this cargo, but out there on the Gulf, this is a little boat. And so he says, I always have to go over the waves. And so going over the waves for a while, I have to turn and go over the waves in a different direction so that I can keep my heading in a certain direction so that I can know where I am. So this is what he's saying. You've got to set your heart. It means to actually purposefully consider and do what God has commanded you to do. Make it where that it is your heart, your longing to follow His laws. Because His laws are for you, not against you. He's not telling you to do this because He didn't want you to have fun. What He's telling you to do is to do it so that you'll have a more abundant life. And so set your heart. Just like He tells the husbands, love your wife. He tells the wives, before your husband. So when He tells us these things, it's telling you, what's the setting? Oh, and so we can turn around and set that correctly for ourselves so that we can find the right destination. And sooner or later, it becomes second nature to you. He didn't even look at the compass many times, but he knew exactly where he was headed and what number he had to be on to be able to make sure he got to the barge. And we pull up alongside and then load everything. And it was a big mess. Okay, so that's what you need to do, is not only think about Christ, but set your heart on Him, so that what you're wanting to do is for Him. Now, here's an interesting thing. God tells us He is good and Satan is evil. So what we know is that there's both good and evil out there. In fact, God created the tree of knowledge knowing that there's both good and evil. When Satan said you'll be like God, he wasn't kidding, because God knows there's good and evil. What He was trying to spare Adam and Eve was to know evil. We know evil because we've grown up in a world that's just steeped in evil. And so how do you know good? Well, God chooses good, and He tells us that's who He is. And Satan chooses evil, that's who he is. They are diametrically opposed, and God says, I cannot do evil, and Satan cannot do good. So it shows you how he has his mind set on what he wants to accomplish. What does he want to be, and who is he? What is he to the core? He has set his heart on being good. Just like we must. We must set it on either good or evil. We can't have some good and some evil. It just doesn't work that way. Could you imagine paying some of your bills and not paying the rest of your bills? Well, you're going to have all kinds of problems at the end of the month, of a couple of months, you know. Somebody's going to come calling. I always used to think, years and years and years ago, And when people would call and they asked me, is this Mr. Cliver? I knew good and well they were wanting me to pay something. You know, what do I owe? Who are you? You know, because I knew they were calling to get their money that was due them. So we have to choose good and evil. We can see here that God said, I'm good. Choose me. Choose to be with me. Choose to be what I do, what I am, what I feel, how I act, how I do everything that I do. And we know also that Satan is evil. Just yesterday, I was today. I think it was today, but it happened. I think yesterday, I was watching a video talking to Amanda earlier about that, about France having a big parade. Did anybody see this? They had a big parade, and they had these huge, wouldn't call them floats, but these huge creatures that they had developed, and one of them was a woman with fire coming out of her stomach, and eyes that were red and beaming, and fire coming out of her hand. She had a ram's horn, all kinds of evil symbols all over her, and they said this was Lilith. And if anybody knows about the stupid people who invented Lilith and said she was the first wife of Adam, well, that's a lie. And then right beside her came along a big giant bull. And this bull was breathing fire and smoke out of its nose and everything. And they said, this is Baal. And they had a crowd there like you can't imagine. And they're all worshiping Baal and Lilith. All they're worshiping, see, is Satan. Anytime you worship a false god or you do things that are not good, you are worshiping Satan by doing evil. It's as simple as that. But you have been given the ability to change. He has given you the ability to do what is right to do. Now, in a minute, we'll get into the brain and how to do that. So understand, you have this ability to choose. And you have an ability to choose it if you want to. One of the things that really irritated me, my father would say to me, he would say, well, son, he'd call me that because I was so bright. Well, son, if you wanted to do it, you would have. Oh, it used to irritate me because I did want to do that, but I forgot, and I had other things that were going on, and this and that and the other. But really and truly, what we do is what we want to do. How we talk, how we act, choice of words, choice of feelings, choice of emotions within us. It's all because that's what we want to do. So we have to make sure that we're choosing rightly. In fact, can you imagine a guy having an apartment like this, living in a penthouse, probably living alone, and he's got sitting there, more than likely, many months out of the year, he's not even there. He's off flying here and there. He's late for board meetings or whatever. And then a guy like this, why are they in those situations? It's because they choose. Probably the most profound picture I ever saw was a homeless guy. He was sleeping under a piece of cardboard, and out front he had a sign that said, I used to be like you. What changed? The reality is, if you want to, especially in this country, you can change and become anything you want to be. Can a Christian live in a penthouse like this? Yes, they can. Can a Christian live in a tent like this? Yes, they can. But they've lost hope or they have a direction. So it's very important for you to be able to see that you have the ability to choose. No matter who you have been before, you can now choose to set your heart on God. And no matter What you think of what's going on, God chose to be good and Satan chose to be evil, and he's given you that same choice. And it's so strong with him that he says he cannot do evil. Can you imagine if we would say, we can't do evil? God says you can be angry, but don't do evil. Why? Why can't we do evil? Because it's not in you to do that. It's not who you are. You can't use evil words. You can't use evil actions. You can't do evil things because it isn't who you are. Now let's take a look at our last point. And this is going to take us a little time. Go over to Philippians 2 and see how he tells us to think. Philippians 2 and verse 5. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. Did you hear that? What is an attitude? It's who you are. Have you ever heard anybody say something rude to you, and then you say, that was rude, and they're saying, no, I'm just being direct. And you say, no, you're being rude. Well, that's just who I am. That's the way it is. I'm not going to change. It's just who I am. Okay, this is their attitude. And you see other people who are so sweet and so kind, but they don't do anything. They don't get anything accomplished. They're just sweet and kind. Well, that's their attitude. That's who they are. And so let's talk about how to have the habit of good. Here's the thing. 95% of what you do every single day is a habit. It's a habit that you have produced. Your mind has brought it forth. Here's an answer, for example, and you accept it. And the more you accept it, the more it becomes a habit. I remember there was a guy we all worked with, and sometimes we had to stand in line to do things. I can't remember, get your check or whatever it was. And so everybody knew what he would do. If someone goosed him, then he would immediately turn around and hit whoever's behind him. So somebody, about 2 or 3 people back, would reach up there and goose him, and he'd turn around and hit the people behind him. And everybody would laugh, Why would he do that? Because he had accepted that form of response so often that it became a habit. Now, I remember reading about a little girl one time who was scared. A man came into the house and he had a big beard and rough clothes. He had a real deep accent, and he was a very rough acting man, and she got scared. She ran into her room, she hid behind the dresser, and she sat there and shook until the guy left. And when the guy left, she came out, everything was fine. And so that happened often. It happened often enough that when she became mature, she was a very shy person who was afraid to even get out of their house. Or certainly not be confronted with people who scare her. That's a habit. What happens is she has accepted that answer or that response, solution, over and over and over again, so that immediately the brain brings up that response, that solution to the problem. And it may be that your solution when someone's talking bad at you is to stand up and get loud and talk bad to them, and then all of a sudden you're in a fight. Because that is your solution to the problem of somebody saying something against you. And what has happened in the past is you have done this so many times that it has become a habit to you. Does that make sense? And so we have habits that we need to break because they're habits of wanting to be a certain way or demanding that we are a certain way, when that way is against what God has commanded us to do or say or be. And here's the fascinating part. That means that only 5% of what you do in a day is a new choice. It's something. That's why today seems like it did yesterday. That's why tomorrow will seem like it was today. Because 95% of what we're doing is a habit. We come in to work, we set our drink down. Oh, how'd you get a drink? Oh, I always put that stuff together before I get into work, and I always make sure I have my lunch and everything. We are habitual people, and what we have to do is train ourselves to have habits for God. And the problem with it is, it's got to come here in this 5%. So what do you know about this? It's hard work to change a habit. Why is it hard work? Because what you already know and what you're already doing is so comfortable to you that to change it is uncomfortable. But the habits that you have need to be changed because they do not fit with God's style of thinking and doing. You remember that little amygdala? And I told you how it holds all the feelings. If the first thing that you do is feel, then what you have to do, and I'm going to tell you how to do this because it will help you greatly. If the first thing you feel is get mad, or the first thing you do is set your teeth or your body in a certain position, then what you have to do is train yourself to stop. Take a breath in and let it out. And give your mind time to process it. And go to the new habit, the new you. In order to do that, that's hard work. Because we feel good doing what comes natural. But that which is natural is not of God. You ever try to make a dog sit down? And you say, sit down. Well, the dog doesn't know, sit down. And so you say, sit down, and you push on his rear to sit him down. What does he do? He pushes back harder than ever. See, that's a dog. That's not you. You've got a brain to be able to, that you can change. You've got a brain you can manipulate and use. Yes, it's hard work to get new habits, but it requires that work because the new habits have to be brought forth and you have to accept it enough to where you train your brain to bring that forward and not your old habit. And that may take some time. For some people, it takes a long time. Oh, this looks so easy. The old habits are that way. The new habits are this way. Oh, really? I tell you what happens is I usually take a step up and fall backwards. Go all the way down into my old habits. But sometimes I run down there because they were comfortable. And that's where I want to be. In order to step up to the new habit, it takes hard work. How hard is it to go to the old habits? It's not hard to go down. It's hard to go up. It takes hard work. And for some people, they can't even change at all. If you want to change your life, change your habits. Change your habits, because your habits mold who you are today. You've got to be a person after God's heart. You've got to be a person who sets your heart on God, doing good, because that is who God is. You've got to be able to set your heart on the attitude of Christ. So then when you're doing something, you're doing it for Him. You go to work in the morning, and you say, man, it's great to be here. And your boss comes over, here, this workload has to be done before you go home today. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the trust. And you get busy on it. How can you do that? You're mad. No, you've got to set a new habit. You've got to set a habit where you're saying, I am happy to be able to accomplish this for God. And so you've got a total different way of looking at things, a total different way of doing things. And let me tell you, the truth is, you don't break a bad habit, you replace it with a good one. That bad habit goes way back, wherever it was started, back into your subconscious mind, and it's lost. Now, it may come up every once in a while, but you see, you've got power now because your new habit is at work, and your new habit is capable of doing it. It may go back into the subconscious mind, but your conscious mind is what develops your new habit. And many times we are torn between the two. The old habits or the new, changing into the new. We're the ones that have to decide who we're going to be, how we're going to act, how we're going to think, how we're going to live, how are we going to treat this other person, how are we going to treat our boss, how are we going to treat our spouse, how are we going to treat our children. Are we going to allow our children to manipulate us like they have in the past? Are we going to allow yourself to manipulate your children? I'll give you an example. So you go over, sit down, you're comfortable and everything, and so you say, honey, could you go get me? And she gets up and goes and does it. Which one has the better character? Which one's for the other person? See, boys, it's very important for you to be able to check yourself out like that and see and notice it all. And so here's the problem. A new habit, it says, takes a minimum of 3 days, but the average is around 2 months. 2 months I've got to do this and fight that old habit? Yes, and sometimes it'll take 8 months because it's so ingrained in you. Isn't that exciting? No. But let me ask you a question. When you get on this side over here, all the way over there, isn't it great you've got the new habit and you're not the old you? The things that people got tired of, the things that ruin your life, the things that shun people, the things that destroy the way people react to you. Yeah, that's great. Now we have the new habit. And so here's what we do. Here's how you do it all. You start each day with the decision to follow Christ. And meaning, you get up in the morning and you say to yourself, now, today, this day, I'm going to do everything I can for God. You know what that's called? If you were to get up every day and do that, you know what that's called? Oh, folks, that's called a habit. What happened? That's called a habit, and you have developed it by doing it day after day after day. If you need to, write your little card out, put it on your nightstand. You know, when the alarm goes off and you hit your alarm and you sit up and you look over there, and there's that card telling you, today, start your day with a decision to follow Christ. I've decided to follow Christ. And decide to do so. Make it a habit. Make everything you do a habit. And then guess what? Who's in control of your brain? You are. And what's your brain doing? Honoring God. You're no longer allowing it to control you. You're no longer saying, oh, what am I going to think? How am I going to act? What am I going to do? No, you're not going to do that because you have decided you're going to be different. That's the way to do it. You've got to start a new habit. You've got to control your emotions. You've got to control what brings into your mind, brings up. You've got to be in control of it, because a Christian is one who is in control. You know, it says, go and teach them the discipline of Christ. Oh, discipline, I don't like that word. That's a horrible word. Yeah, it's hard work, but it has great payoff. Not only do you become better, but you become better for your God. If you're not right with God, now's the time. Make sure that you are right as we stand and we sing this song together.